Hello everyone, I'm Tom64.
And I'm Richie.
And welcome to the HellfireComms playthrough of Klonoa Door to Phantomile. We're going to be playing this via the Switch version of the Fancy Reverie series. Neat little remaster collection they put out recently. We're going to be doing both games, but why don't we just start with the first one? You know, that makes sense numerically to me.
Makes sense to me too, although it's not quite fully how I experienced Klonoa.
How did you experience Klonoa? Guy who wanted Klonoa brought to the channel for years, but I kept saying no.
Well, so my first ever experience of Klonoa was actually Klonoa 2 via those demo discs that you used to get for the PlayStation 2?
Yes.
That just had a whole bunch of different games. Well, on one of those discs, it had Klonoa 2, and it gave you 2 levels. I believe it was Sea of Tears and Jungle Slider.
Right.
I really loved that. It was great fun. And then I didn't really think much about the series after that point, because I'm pretty sure that Klonoa 2 was rare as all hell back then. So I just never saw it, never got it. Then in 2008, Bandai Namco released a remake of the original, now commonly called Klonoa Wii, even though it's... Well, actually, I think in Europe, I think it is called Klonoa Wii, but pretty much everywhere it's just Klonoa, which is a full 3D remake of the original Klonoa Door to Phantomile, which had a number of different changes to it, but that was sort of my first full Klonoa game, and I loved it. I had great fun with it, decided that I was going to do a commentary of it. Just so happened that the decision to do that was around the same time that there was a certain set of auditions for a certain commentary channel, which I may or may not now be part of, and was not successful at that time. Obviously, eventually got there. And then years later, when I got my switched from the Dazzle to the Huepow, I redid my playthrough of Klonoa, and eventually managed to get my hands on Klonoa 2 on the PS2. I did a playthrough of that, had a wonderful time. That was everything I wanted it to be. And it's one of those things of, I think, I've not actually ever really brought up doing Klonoa on the channel, because I don't know why, it's just never come up. But then they announced the Fancy Reverie series for the franchise's 25th anniversary, and it was one of those things just like, oh, this would be good to sort of, one, relive these games that actually I do have there's a very special place in my heart for them. But also it's just like, Tom, do you want to play them? Because might be happy to do a commentary on them. And here we are.
Yeah. Now, as we go through the game, you will see that this is heavily based on that 2008 Wii remake, with some changes here and there. The most obvious one being that they changed Klonoa's model back to how he appeared in the original PS1 game. So, obviously, he's got the choker, he's got, like, the red shorts and whatnot. Klonoa 2 is where you'll probably see his more iconic look, but the Pac-Man hat remains.
Oh, of course, you can't not have the Pac-Man hat. It's iconic. Now, there are a few other things. So, with the Fancy Reverie series version of Klonoa Door to Phantomile, it's a weird amalgamation of the Wii version and the original PS1 version. The sort of... the levels themselves are basically remastered versions of those included in the Wii version, but the enemy placement is much closer to the original PS1 game. Also, they have used for some bizarre reason, the original compressed PS1 audio for the cutscene dialogue.
Yeah.
Questionable choice. It's one of the only things I've just been like, why did you choose to do that? Because it doesn't sound very good. Especially when I'm pretty sure that they either re-recorded or had much higher res versions of that audio from the Wii remake. But there we go, these things happen. They also have, because they rewrote the entire script for the Wii remake. This goes much closer back to the original PS1 script, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
And I think those are sort of the big sort of differences, similarities between the two. The other thing to note is that normal difficulty, as it is called, is closer to the original Klonoa and Klonoa 2 in terms of if you have 3 hearts, you take, I think it's either half a heart or a third of a heart of damage every time you get hit.
Yeah.
And your wind bullet goes a certain distance. Easy mode is basically what Klonoa Wii had as its standard mode.
Oh.
So you have 5 hearts, you take a bit less damage, and your wind bullet goes a bit further.
So that combined with the divisive English dub, I can see why some people may not favour that version.
Yes, I mean, ultimately there was nothing wrong with that remake. It was perfectly fine, and to be honest, I quite liked the dub when I played it. They had quite a lot of very good voice actors. It was a kids game script voiced by voice actors. You're gonna get a certain sound and a certain vibe. And it was admittedly also around that time where people were kind of not so happy with games that had a bit more of a kid-friendly slant. They wanted their hardcore blood and guts and gore games, and you know, Klonoa was just this cute little family-friendly title with a surprisingly heartbreaking punch towards the end. Deserved so much more love than it actually got. And it did get positive critical reception, that Wii version, but it was an absolute commercial flop, and basically they tried to revive Klonoa at that point, because it flopped, Klonoa was dead in the water. Obviously, they are trying again with this, and seem to be having a much better time of it, because in terms of the sales, and obviously we've only got so much data to go with on this, but it made number 5 in the UK sales chart in its first week.
Nice.
52% of its sales being on the Switch.
Hell yeah.
And 33% being on the PlayStation 5. And in Japan, the Switch version sold 9,602 copies in its first week, placing it 5th in the sales chart. It says PS4 version, whether that's accurate or not, I don't know, shifted 1,252 units, which made it number 25. But either way, it seems to have sold pretty well in the grand scheme of things. It was trending on Twitter when it was released, and there were just a lot of people having a wonderful time with it, and I think that I feel like it has done better in the sales charts, but I think it has hit number 1 at some point. But obviously, it depends when people update things on Wikipedia.
Really?
But it has been lovely to see a resurgence of love for Klonoa, because I think as a franchise, it is so unique and has such a clear vision and style and approach that there's not really been anything quite like it before it came out or since. And I think, yeah, it just deserves all the love it can get, because it's a wonderful little series.
Exploding eggs for everyone.
I know, it's great.
Yeah, you get that little fanfare for getting all the villagers in a given vision. They're like the main collectible for the game. I'm going to try my best to get all 6 at every level. That probably won't happen in Klonoa 2, because there are a couple of do-or-die sections there, which I'm not particularly keen on, but whatever, I'll save that complaining for when we get to that.
Yeah, we're a full game and a bit away from where those start to kick in. I think there's only a couple of levels where they have Moment Dolls. So in Klonoa 1, you're rescuing villagers, or dreamers / Phantomilians as they are called. In Klonoa 2, you are rescuing Moment Dolls. We will discuss the Moment Dolls when we get to Klonoa 2. But yeah, in both instances, you unlock optional levels that you can do at the end. Klonoa 1 is probably a bit more important, because you get a bit of extra plot if you do it. you do not really get the same in Klonoa 2, but in both instances, they're just fun little extra, much harder challenges for you to take on if you so choose to.
I was having a little chat with you earlier, Rich. Like, Klonoa does not seem, for the most part, and obviously I'm generalising here because I can only go on what I see and what I hear, Klonoa doesn't seem to get brought up all that much in regards to, like, the classic platformer franchises. Obviously, you have your Marios, your Sonics, your Crash Bandicoots, your Spyros. Never Klonoa, even though it was on the PS1 along with Spyro and Crash.
Yeah, it's bizarre. Like, because I'm pretty sure that the original Klonoa was well received. And it is commonly called one of the best 2.5D platformers. And one of the best PlayStation 1 games ever.
Yeah.
Probably what occurred is that Klonoa's got a very specific look and style to it, which is obviously what I love and what works. But it is very Japanese, and very Japanese kawaii type style. And I suppose there are times where that doesn't necessarily land quite so well or become hugely popular, but it's always sort of sat in that space of sleeper hit of it was very well received, and a lot of people have loved things with it. I mean, Namco won Best Character for Klonoa at the 1997 Japanese Game Awards.
Wow.
And apparently Videogames.com gave it Platform Game of the Year in 1998. So there was a lot of love and praise for it, but I think in terms of sales, it's just never been a series that has sold well. Part of that might have been not great advertising, part of that might have just been that there weren't a lot of copies out in the wild. Could be all sorts of things. I mean, I remember that I don't remember actually seeing any copies of Klonoa 2 out in the wild when I was a kid. And it's definitely a game that I would have picked up had I seen a copy of it. Because I'd played it on the demo discs and I liked it and enjoyed it, and it's one of those things that I would have been like, oh, yes please.
Yeah.
But hey, that's life. At least it seems that Klonoa is getting more of the love that it deserves now, all these years later.
Indeedy so. And just because we're mentioning the PS1 and PS2 games, don't think we've forgotten the GBA titles and whatnot.
Oh, of course. Klonoa does have quite a few other little spin-off games that it had over the years, but it's still not actually had a huge number of titles in that span. So the list of games is Daughter Phantomile, 1997, Moonlight Museum in 1999, Empire of Dreams, then Lunatea's Veil, then which both Empire of Dreams and Lunatea's Veil were both 2001, and then in 2002 you had Beach Volleyball, Dream Champ Tournament, and Klonoa Heroes Densetsu no Star Medal. And then we had nothing until Klonoa Wii in 2008, and then nothing after that until the year 2022.
God, that was a rough 14-year gap right there.
Although, quite interesting to hear that, so they weren't always going to call this release of the games the Fantasy Reverie series. Apparently in 2019 there was a trademark filing under the name Klonoa of the Wind Encore, which was discovered. There were also further trademark filings for Wahoo Encore and 1 and 2 Encore, which were found in September 2021.
Right.
And then in December of 2021, the trademark for Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series was revealed. So there were potentials, but that's an interesting little tidbit. And the other interesting tidbit is that But obviously, while the original Klonoa got re-released on the Wii, so it's the game that's probably one of the easiest to play on modern hardware, Klonoa 2 had basically received no re-release, remaster of any sort. And I don't think it was even available on any like backwards compatible doohickeys or whatever.
Ugh.
So it's basically impossible to get Klonoa 2 until this game, which is ridiculous considering how much fun I have with that game and how good I think it is. But it's so wonderful now that people do get to experience these wonderful titles all over again. I certainly had an absolute whale of a time doing so.
I enjoyed my first time through, for sure. Now we have to contend with the villains of the game. The big bad, Gadius, just pissed off, but Joker here will be the most recurring antagonist in the game. He may seem all smiles, but there's some sociopathy underneath that clown mask of his.
As with all of the best Jokers in the town.
Indeedy so. This whole game, series rather, kind of deals with dreams and whatnot. That's not really a spoiler, you know, they were mentioning dreams at the start, and there's the whole deal with like moon kingdoms and such. I just kind of liken this to Nights, honestly.
Yeah, it does very much sit in that same vibe of, I suppose the bright colour palettes, the very unique enemy designs. Case in point, Mr. Rongo Lango over here. A boss fight which certainly brings back memories because it featured in my audition tape, for which I got slightly summarily mocked for saying that this is a perfectly easy boss fight, but one that can be a little bit finicky at times because of how Rongo Lango works. Something that is completely accurate, but you know, different times back then.
Indeed.
And also, it was very, very, very great to, because, you know, we don't do retakes here, but to see Tom suffer quite a bit on a run of Rongo Lango, just like, yes, karma!
You know what? That's perfectly fair, but he's gone. Bye-bye, woo, see ya.
I mean, that's basically how the fight is supposed to go and supposed to look if you do it well and properly, and he doesn't decide to be a dick.
He's just kind of a discount Digimon, really.
But sometimes he can just get you. It's the same with most of the boss fights in the game, really, and the game as a whole. It is not a difficult game, is Klonoa. It just can have a few challenging moments. I think that you're very unlikely to get through the entire game without seeing any deaths, because it is sometimes very easy to just miss a jump and fall to your doom. And particularly on normal mode, to get hit just a few too many times.
Yeah, collision damage, that's one of my biggest pet peeves in 2D platformers. It's why I stick to the 3D ones mostly.
Yes, so you've got those things which do make Klonoa a bit more of a challenge than it could be. Personally, you know, when I decided I was going to get the Fantasy Reverie series, I was just like, I'm just going to be lazy and play on easy mode because, you know, I've beaten these games before, I don't need a challenge for these, I'm just here to have fun and relive these stories and have a wonderful time.
Well, I don't to cope. You play games how you want to, mate, and we'll worry about people getting kidnapped and, you know, moon kingdoms and all that jazz.
Oh, yes, I mean, that is all a lot more important, and obviously the plot.
Indeed. Just have to keep repeating Moon Kingdom to make sure you realise we're paying attention to the game, because once Richie starts on a tangent, it's kind of hard to get him to stop.
Yeah, I mean, it's why you guys love me, I think, maybe, I don't know.
Well, it has been a while since your last commentary, so maybe my feelings are hurt.
Hey, I've been rehearsing for a Disney show.
Look, you know that's not true, so don't take it personally.
No, I know.
Let the eggs explode upon your face and... Could have phrased that differently. Let's just move on to the next vision. This is where things start to pick up a wee bit in difficulty. You'll notice that enemies have become a bit more aggressive. They'll expect you to make a few more dicey jumps here or there. Granted, I am terrible at video games, but you throw in collision damage with enemies that have, like, spikes on their person, It's just a recipe for N-Tom-themed disaster.
It's also because, you know, you're starting to get those slightly more challenging jumps over bottomless pits, and your flutter jump can only do so much.
Mm-hmm. Just while I go through the motions here, mate, because we are working our way up to an objective, why don't you go ahead and read off some of those enemies that you love so much?
Yes, so I've always loved when games have enemies that have got sort of fun, quirky little names. This game franchise is obviously no different. The enemy names that I mostly only ever remember are the moos, you know, the lovely little pink, red things, sometimes yellow, sometimes black, whatever colour they decide to throw them at, because that's basically what the majority of the enemies are in this game, is just some version of moo.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got, obviously, moos, you've got giant moos, you've got spear moos, you've got monkey moos, which we are going to see shortly. All manner of moos.
Indeed.
And then you've got things like, I think that's a Shelly, of some description. And there's all sorts of others. They're just fun and funky.
These things will be the first test for you gauging the length of your wind bullet, at least in my experience.
Oh yes, and this Teton, as it's called, is also going to be your test to make sure that you know that if you grab it, you hit a platform, it's going to pop. Because of course it's going to pop, because whenever you use the wind bullet, it turns things into like a balloon, because it blows it up.
Mm-hmm.
Makes perfect sense. So when you hit something, it's going to pop. So that will throw you off if you aren't prepared in trying to grab it.
It's little incremental, you know, beats in difficulty and whatnot. Humpst. Oh god, it's something from Fraggle Rock.
Very much so, actually, yeah.
So occasionally throughout these levels, we will have to A, pose like Sonic, and also get keys to open doors and whatnot.
Oh, of course. I mean, it makes sense. They do gradually sort of throw more and more ways of sort of blocking your progress. We've had throwing enemies at doors. Obviously, we've now got keys. There'll be a couple of kind of puzzly type things that we need to solve for later rooms. I think there's definitely a switch puzzle that is at some point during the forest. I can't remember whether it's end of this vision or in vision 4.
It's definitely later on. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it must be, or it might be 3-2. Because there's a weird thing that happens with the story of Klonoa 1. Klonoa 2 is pretty much consistent in terms of you will have 2 levels in an area, and then maybe a third, and then a boss. That's pretty much set in stone. Klonoa, while it will consistently have 2 levels per vision, they don't necessarily all take place in the same area. So, I believe that this one does, but I think it might be Vision 3 where we get Part 1 in the Water Kingdom, or it might be Vision 4. It's what somewhere around there it gets a bit funky.
Right. Another key, just for me.
Yes, well, that's what we're going to need to progress. Good job, because the door's right there.
Huzzah!
These puzzles are never that hard. I think that the most complicated puzzle in Klonoa 1 is in one of the final levels, and it's a switch puzzle.
Ah, I see.
In Klonoa 2, I think technically the most challenging puzzle is... at least the one that probably takes the most to figure out is in the Mountains of Mirror Mirror. in one of the levels in that section of the game.
You will notice, as we go through this game, it's not going to be a perfect no damage run. Those sorts of things are behind me, especially with touch damage and the like.
As I also suspect that it won't be a no-death run either, because try as you might, sometimes you will get screwed over by just a hair on a jump, or a bit of clip damage will just send you careening off into the death pits below. But hey, it's all good.
Klonoa can be a little bit of a slippery fiend from time to time. He doesn't exactly stop on a dime.
No, I mean, I think he stops slower than he used to. So this goes back to this video that does a very good job of detailing all of the differences between the different versions. But I think it might have been in the original Klonoa, he had much more of a sense of momentum. Right. So if you were running down a slope, he did sort of keep going a little bit. I think in the Wii version, he did stop on a dime if you stopped. I think this version sits somewhere slightly in the middle. I could be wrong on that point. I'm going to have to watch that video again before the next session.
Hey, it's all good, mate. It's all good.
But it's something along those lines. Oh, the jug pot folk are so cute.
They are. Little abominations, but cute abominations.
Basically most of the denizens of Phantomile of some description. They're all abominations when you look at them.
I mean, there's Huepow, who looks like something out of Elements.
And obviously the forest folks of Forelock, or some sort of weird chicken turkey man creatures.
They're like wearing tail shoes, the classic ones, and boxing gloves as well.
Boxing gloves that look like lobster claws. Because they are lobster claws.
Okay.
And then it's like a tadpole tail. Weird combinations, but hey, dreams! This is why they get away with it.
This is just Mad Libs, the commentary / character analysis at this point. So yeah, let's go to Jugpot, why not?
It's not like we were, enjoying a perfectly lovely forest level.
I've seen better forest levels.
It's true, and actually, the forest levels, when we return to Forelock, are definitely better. And actually, now that we've gotten to this point, it's just like, oh yes. So, 2-2 is the first level in Jugpot. Then 3-1, we return to Forelock. And then continue on from there. So you get that sort of very weird little hopping about of the different areas. It's not until Vision 5 where things kind of reset to 2 visions in a single area, and it's nice and neat.